Hey everybody, what is going on? I am Maximus Rex, and this is Big Baby Reviews. Check out my comics at KingComics.CA. Check out my videos on YouTube. King Comics 2021 is the channel. Instagram, Maximus Rex 13, and on Facebook, Max Rex and or Big Baby. So today is Rob Liefeld Day, trying a few different new things today. Basically, learned some new information, and I'm shooting an impromptu video kind of in between shoots as it relates to last week's review of Youngblood Bloodsport #1, because I did a bit of research after that review and discovered some interesting stuff relating to what you see in front of you, which is the Youngblood Bloodsport #2 issue, what they call the bootleg, or kind of what is just more generally known as an ash can. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Also, I'm trying something new as far as the production of the videos. So this is the first time I try a screen capture here. You'll either see my hands or not, just because, hello. I'm also shooting with my regular old phone camera, just because with the screen grab, I've never done this before. I'm not quite sure how it works. I do think I left something up that maybe I shouldn't, but I'll just take that down now and keep going so I don't have to start over again. Again, something new, so bear with me if there's a few little technical glitches and difficulties and maybe a few pauses or something. Again, as it relates to this review, we're looking at this that I didn't even know existed. And the reason we're doing the screen capture, or trying it anyways today, is because the only version of the comic that really exists is that I've been able to find is online, right? So there is a gentleman, and I'll be talking and giving credit to these guys as far as their research goes on internet. So I'll start off with basically, I didn't know this issue actually existed. Doing some research, I came upon a few interesting things. So this is the cover. And it kind of comes from this Reddit post. This is from 2019, if I'm not mistaken. So a good 6 years ago already. So caught my white whale over the weekend. Youngblood Bloodsport 2 bootleg, or ashcan, right? Estimated 1,500 or less produced. Only released at WIZARDWORLD LA 2003. This was the first time I've ever even seen a physical copy for sale. So they're pretty rare and hard to come upon and read. So basically the only version I've got is this digital version. Quality is not so great. I've read the comic, but to read it out loud to you, or at least parts of it's going to be almost impossible, because the pictures just don't have that the right quality, especially when it comes down to the lettering and the word balloons, the phylacteries. So I've just kind of written down a quick plot synopsis for each page, so I got at least something to say when we look at the pages, because just being able to read it was pretty painstaking. I would zoom in, and then the quality would kind of diminish. So, you know, guessing at some things and figuring out words rather than actual, like, pleasant reading. So I'll do my best to go through that with you guys and explain what's going on. So that's kind of some interesting details here. And I found this website here. Don't know the gentleman's name, but I'll mention the website. You can go check it out. ForgottenAwesome.blogspot. And he's got some, I've read some of the other stuff he's got up here too. It's mostly a focus on the title, as you can see here, is Alan Moore's Forgotten Awesome. So the focus is on Alan Moore working for Awesome Comics, mostly on Supreme. And he's got some interesting backstory about all that too. But what we're interested in, obviously, is Youngblood Bloodsport #2. So here's what the guy says here, and he's provided us with the pictures. So thank you, whoever you are out there doing this blog. And again, it gives you a different point of view of maybe this comic. I reviewed #1 last week and said I really enjoyed it. It was kind of like, you know, to me, The Boys meets Youngblood. And it is kind of typical Mark Millar writing, obviously shock and awe kind of stuff, and disgusting. But I do kind of appreciate that and find that entertaining. I'm not easily offended, so a lot of the stuff that he does and even mentions sometimes in some of the dialogue, you know, sometimes what Mark Millar puts in your head is more disgusting than what's actually on the page there. A lot of it is suggested in the dialogue more so than actually shown in the comic, right? So, you know, when people get offended and stuff, they should be offended at kind of what their own imagination is coming up with from Mark Millar's writing and prompts, we'll say. Getting ahead of myself, so let's just read the description here and get into the comics. So, Youngblood Bloodsport #2. In my After Awesome series, I talked about how Rob Liefeld and company moved on from Awesome and set up Arcade Comics. It's here if for some reason you want to read it again. They released the Arcade Comics at conventions to prove there was still interest in Youngblood and the other series. One of them was Youngblood Bloodsport. Here's what I said about Bloodsport before. So before going on, I feel like this is probably a last-ditch effort when Awesome Comics is around to just get this published before maybe the company tanks or something. I could be wrong about that, but I know they did kind of, you know, fall apart at some point, right? There's Awesome Entertainment after Extreme Studios at Image, once Rob Liefeld leaves, and then there's Arcade Comics. There's a few different companies that he kind of spearheads or starts and that it just doesn't really work out. So a lot of start and stop Youngblood series. Youngblood Bloodsport being one of them. But I was, again, just thrilled to actually have some extra material here with issue 2. And that's why we've got this review today, which I'm pushing other stuff that I've already recorded for my Rob Liefeld segments just 1 week ahead, so we can actually, have this follow-up to the review from last week. So read what he wrote before about this. About Youngblood Bloodsport 2, or 1, I guess the whole miniseries. Mark Millar started writing Youngblood Bloodsport, the worst version of Youngblood that actually made it to print. So I disagree with this guy, and that's okay. We're allowed to disagree. I think it's pretty fun and personally my favorite version, although I will say I have not read all of Alan Moore's Youngblood stuff. I've read a bit. I've got a few extreme comics he wrote here and there, but I don't really have the full picture. While some of that is interesting, I do think overall just the shock value of that first issue of Youngblood Bloodsport is again, overall my favorite Youngblood comic. In spite of what anyone else says. While a number of versions over the years were bad, or just mediocre, Bloodsport is downright repugnant, and it revels in it. And that's Mark Millar's writing, and that's, what I appreciate and find fun and entertaining about Mark Millar's writing. The series deals with a situation where there are too many superheroes and not enough job opportunities. When a new version of Youngblood is being put together, all of the various members show up to audition. The problem is this will be a group put together from super teams from alternate dimensions, so that there can only be one Youngblood member from this dimension. In order to decide who it'll be, the Youngblood members have to fight each other to the death to decide who it will be. A little redundant there in the writing. Repetitive. Sorry to criticize. Remember all the jokes Moore made through Suprema and the Dazzle comics about how bad comic writing had gotten. This is exactly the kind of thing he was talking about. Everything is a bad drug or sex joke designed to offend. It's the early 2000s, right? Again, Mark Millar was very popular, and that was one of the reasons, right? The Authority was really awesome, that where he kind of became known a little bit. That first, he was doing that with Frank Quitely, that run. Mark Millar, Frank Quitely on The Authority. Go check it out. That's a great run. Only one full issue came out. There was a bootleg version of issue 2, but it was printed in such limited numbers, it's impossible to find a scan of it online, and I've never seen a physical copy for sale. Josh Hines recently found a copy. He was nice enough to send me photos of it. I assume it's the gentleman who from the previous Reddit post. So his name is Josh Hines. So if anyone has spent all these years looking to read about a fight to the death between Suprema and Twilight, your wish is granted. Don't know if many people are clamoring for that, but it is in this comic. Most likely Bloodsport 2 wasn't really ready for whatever convention they were going to, so they just put it out in this bootleg edition, but because of this, we get to see a bit behind the curtain. So you'll see as we go through the pages, most of them are pretty much finished and colored. There's only 14 pages to the comic, so obviously maybe not all of issue 2, or issue 2 is pretty short, and there's some more stuff coming. That's why I feel like this is kind of, as you'll see with the comic, it feels obviously incomplete. Few pages in there also are just pencils, and I even suspect just like rough layouts, which Rob Liefeld does at a smaller size, and maybe just blown up to be the size of a comic book page. He usually takes a regular old 8.5 by 11 sheet, folds it in half, and that's pretty much proportionately the size of a comic book page. So he draws on like half of that page, then blows it up, and usually from there, I'm not sure if he gets it printed on Blue Line or if he does light table or whatever, but that's basically his process. So you'll see it is actually fun to see some of the early layouts and stuff as compared to the finished stuff. But definitely an unfinished comic here, right? And that's why it came out not as an official publication, but as a bootleg kind of ashcan convention-only comic. One of the more interesting parts of this find is the bits of Millar's script. Clearly, this was intended as a 4-issue miniseries, but he also wrote in cameos by the likes of Swamp Thing, The Man-Thing, The Heap, and even Namor. He meant this as a send-up of all superheroes, not just the Liefeld awesome ones, even though they in themselves are pretty much analogs of other superheroes, so, they're kind of there anyways, those original superheroes. I don't know if that would have made the series any better, but it was interesting at least. Anyway, check it out for yourself. So the fact that it was supposed to be a 4-issue miniseries makes a lot of sense. That's kind of what I assumed. We're not going to go through too many details of Millar's script, even though it is in there. I feel like it was thrown in there because exactly of the fact that, there's only 14 pages. There's a lot of extra material because there just wasn't much to put in there and much of a story, really. So it's kind of disappointing in that sense. Although Youngblood Bloodsport is really cool and the setup is great, and I think, it could have led to a lot of things. All we have left are these extra 14 pages here, which really just feel like the beginning of the next part of, the series. how stories are generally split into 3 acts, right? So this is the beginning of the second act, and we only get just very little of it. Delivering on some of the concept obviously set up in issue 1 with Youngblood members fighting each other, to the death, to become, the ultimate member of this dimension in this intergalactic, interdimensional Youngblood team. All right. YouTube stars maybe is what I was thinking. Anyways, so you've already seen the cover, right? I had at the beginning of the video. Basically, what I will say about this is Mark Miller's writing it, so they definitely went for that Ultimates kind of cover design layout from back then, the font and stuff, other than the Youngblood title, the 2 bands on the side here, very much like the very popular Ultimates comics coming out, releasing at around the same time, again, written by Miller as well. So here we get the credits. So we got Bloodsport, Youngblood, Bootleg, Bloodsport, or Bootleg, Youngblood, Bloodsport, or Youngblood, Bloodsport, Bootleg. I'm not quite sure how you're supposed to pronounce that. I mean, if I go with logical order, I guess it's Bootleg, Youngblood, Bloodsport. That's what I'm going to go with. So Mark Miller story, Rob Liefeld art. As with issue 1, I'm pretty sure this is finished pencils straight to publication. So the pencils are just kind of played upon on Photoshop levels and brightness and contrast and stuff to make it look like dark ink. And Matt Yaki, that's an interesting last name, color, and Matt Michaels lettering and production. So I guess he was in charge of kind of setting up this whole comic and getting it actually printed is what I feel like. All right, so here we go. We've got page 1, Hero Wood, right? Remember from issue 1, it's not Hollywood, it's Hero Wood. And what is going on this page? Well, let me get my little descriptor here. So Shaft's talking to his agent. How'd you get us into this, right? This mess of having to fight each other to the death, right? They've signed a contract. And he asks, how can the U.S. government do this to people? There's references to the Ultimates in some of the dialogue, to some sort of Image deal. So I don't know if that's referring to when Rob Liefeld was forced to leave or quit Image, whichever side of that you're on. I feel like both are kind of true. Like it was a mutual thing. Badrock also mentions nano cameras that are filming all of this for a fourth. Excuse me, let me try that again. They're filming all of this for the interdimensional, some sort of interdimensional reality show. So it's sometimes fun, I think, with Miller, and especially matching him up with Liefeld. What happens is, a lot of the stuff that should be maybe described in the art is not there. So Miller is throwing a lot of those references into the dialogue. So I don't see any like tiny nano, well, he called them nano cameras, right? So I guess he's playing around the art and the fact that, since it's not drawn, they're still there because they're nano. They're so small you can't see them, right? That's the idea. I feel like here there's kind of a mismatch, but that's interesting to me. Rob Liefeld with Mark Miller, just kind of like with Batman All-Star or All-Star Batman, where Frank Miller's writing and Jim Lee's drawing. There's kind of a disconnect to me between the writing and the art, but which I find kind of interesting because you rarely get to see that, right? Just kind of, an artist and a writer who you just wouldn't really put together in your mind or think that they would work well together. And it kind of proves that to a certain extent, but that aspect of it I find interesting. So, Jim Lee on All-Star Batman, great art, great artist, but just doesn't work with the Frank Miller vibe. If you read Batman, All-Star Batman again, and you kind of imagine Frank Miller's art instead of Jim Lee's, I think it would work perfectly. The problem is the disconnect between the Miller type of story and grittiness and the super slick kind of Jim Lee art. And I feel like there's a bit of that here too, even though I enjoy the comic, right? So that's basically page 1. Let's scroll down to page 2. So, boom, some sort of explosion, Badrock getting attacked, right? Kind of a Liefeld staple where kind of happening off panel. And then there's the reveal that basically this is Photon who's attacking Badrock, right? I guess for his position on this interdimensional Youngblood team. And all throughout Photon, I think, if I can ascertain this properly by zooming in, his dialogue is all kind of in some weird alien language because he is meant to be an alien. So, as hard as it was to read all this stuff up close, his stuff was just kind of gibberish and weird, and I think there's a reason for that, and that's that alien language that's in there. So not much happening on this page other than that. Badrock does remind Photon, hey, what are you doing, man? Kind of, reminds him of a time they fought Cybernet together. I think it's Cybernet. I can barely read it, so I don't know if that's, you know, there's cyber data. That was Cyberforce, I think. So Cybernet, I feel, is like, is that from Terminator or something? Is that a Terminator reference? Is that what it's called in the Terminator movies? I don't remember quite exactly, but I think that's what it is. Anyways, just kind of a lot of weird references to other pop culture stuff in the script, so just pointing that out when it happens. Here we get a cool... I mean, I do think... Let's talk about the art. I do think Liefeld's art style at this period is kind of interesting. I don't know what it is, but I feel like he's looked at muscles and anatomy a bit more, and, you know, the arm muscles here, even his calves down here, a bit thicker, and like there's something in the way he's drawing the limbs that seems to have changed. Even the hands here. Sometimes I wonder if maybe he didn't draw the hands. Is that a possibility? Because they're really well drawn. Not to be insulting, but Rob Liefeld usually doesn't seem to spend much time on hands. They're usually like, if you look at all these other panels, they're mostly like, you know, even cut off and out of the frame and stuff, like Badrock here. But these two hands are pretty darn good. The Shaft redesign costume also kind of keeping a lot of the inspiration from the original where it's recognizable, but, you know, making it different, and it's kind of cool, maybe better than the original. I don't know. So on this page, Photon is talking alien language, so we don't know exactly what he's saying, right? Back off, man. I got promised first crack at Granny. I'm not quite sure what that means there. That's what Shaft says. So shoot some arrows into Photon's chest, and I guess that doesn't stop Photon, but it certainly incapacitates him for a little bit there. So this next page, Badrock is mad. Photon is making him do this, is what I wrote. So like that's what he's saying kind of in the dialogue. And basically Badrock tells Shaft to throw some sort of safety arrow. I forget what it's called exactly. And basically it pushes the driver out. Obviously not, you know, hurting him in any way, but pushes him out of the truck here. And Badrock just grabs Photon. And next page, the reveal, unfortunately, is in rough pencils. So he throws him into this, you know, truck carrying gasoline or gas or something that explodes or that's explosive. And you got Badoom here, right? So they actually threw in the actual digital lettering over what I suspect, again, I believe this is not like actual size pencils. This is some sort of layout that Rob Liefeld did that he blew up for this page here. So that's one of the pages, a good example of the rough unfinished pages in this comic. And then we go back to colors. So I guess they weren't clearly not colored in sequence, or maybe even drawn in sequence. So on this page, I do like the kind of interesting idea of Photon's skeleton here and seeing the top of the head and the fire still coming out there. I mean, I don't know exactly how his anatomy works. It's an interesting visual. I've always thought actually that Photon looked kind of cool. He was never really developed as a character though. So, but this idea that like, you know, that kind of smoke or fire coming off the top of his head is kind of cool. Maybe makes him look like alien Ghost Rider here, but yeah. So what's going on this page? Badrock, we got to get out of this. It's basically the gist of this page. Like he's angry and he's like, we got to get out of this contract that we signed, right? And then we get a random script page. So I don't know if I'm going to assume the pictures here are out of order because it seems odd that it would be right in the middle of the comic. Well, okay, you know what? I say that looking back, there's some clues. It is actually right in the middle of the comic here. So there must have been some page thing. You know, sometimes they throw in an ad so that the pages are where they need to be in sequence for the page reveals and stuff. So, yeah, that's unfortunate. So that is the actual next page right in the middle of the comic. And then we're back to a penciled page. This one, though, I suspect is more of a finished pencil page. That just didn't go to digital inks or coloring yet. So I feel like this is something Rob Liefeld took his small layouts and drew bigger. I could be wrong, but I definitely feel like the penciling here is tighter than the first unfinished page that we saw before. And as much as like, you know, suggesting some of the shadows and that kind of double line rendering he's doing here and stuff. So this is a pretty funny page, actually. So what's going on here? Die Hard in his mask and underwear. I wrote hilarious. I just think that's, I guess you never ever see Die Hard's face. We've never seen his face, never will. And basically he's here with this other lady who's just in a bikini. Not quite sure of like why all of a sudden we're in some sort of bedroom, which makes more sense when you see the next page. There's more of an establishment here. There's almost no backgrounds. They're on a bed, right? And she says something weird. Please don't ask me to reveal my secret identity. Not on a first date. Just some very weird dialogue in there. I don't know why that's thrown in. It's not important to the story. And also when it comes to the word balloons, the phylacteries, so she might be thinking this, not saying it out loud. Then Die Hard says something, and then here she goes. They found us. It's Sentinel, but it's still a thought balloon. So someone fucked up there as far as the production and the lettering, I guess. So that would be Matt Michaels. What am I doing here? Excuse me. Back. Oh, that worked well. There we go. All right, next page is also rough pencils, but again, I think these are more finished pencils, not layout pencils, so probably drawn at a bigger size. Sentinel, I don't know what happened from the last few issues. I saw Sentinel early on with his first costume stuff and what's going on here. I feel this is just kind of a goofy shot that Liefeld drew here. I don't know how else to describe it. Maybe he's trying stuff. He's trying to be more humorous. Maybe because the Mark Miller influence and the humor in the script. I'm not quite sure. What's happening here? So Sentinel trying to kill Die Hard basically is what's going on here, right? Because they're all in that contest. And here it says rough pencils again, but I do feel like these would have been kind of the finished pencils in the comic. So punches right through Die Hard. We know he's a cyborg, right? So he's got like his cyborg bits and stuff coming out. Get some of it here. A little bit of Liefeld body horror, which is we don't get a lot of, I think, in most of his comics. Sentinel, excuse me, did that again. Sentinel was mind tricked into thinking he'd won. Okay, and that it's again once again only said in the dialogue. So up to here, he feels like he's won, but I guess at this point, there's something that kind of goes through his chest here. Is it the girl that Die Hard was with that has some sort of telekinetic powers or telepathy powers or powers to control the mind? I have no idea because it's said in the dialogue once again, and it's not present in the art. So another example of that disconnect between the story and the art and the artist in this case. And it just ends there, and we move on the other side of town is what the narration box says here. So what's going on this page is basically Twilight has just killed Troll, but she's kind of emo about it, and she's crying, and, you know, she regrets it, even though, I mean, she did it willingly. She feels shitty, and then Suprema just comes down to comfort her, basically, as you can see from the images here, right? And, well, I just a few details in the art. Again, Rob Liefeld, like this pose here of Suprema coming down, there's just something about it that I feel is, I don't know, that I really like it. I feel like rarely do I see an image of Rob Liefeld where I feel most of the anatomy pretty much works. Suprema's pretty muscular. He's got her wearing the very low kind of early 2000s pants. The girls, you know, in the girl bands and stuff at that time often had the very, very kind of low, just barely, you know, limited pubic hair kind of pants. So that's what he's got here fashion-wise on her. But the details in the anatomy and the leg muscles and all of this, there's just something about this drawing I like, and I think is not something I would use to criticize Liefeld. I think everything pretty much succeeds in this drawing here, and it just kind of works for me. And then there's other stuff where, like, you know, this profile here of Suprema doesn't quite work for me. There's, you know, something odd about it. Anyway, so Suprema comforting Twilight and then just using her whatever laser heat electric eye powers to it's a pretty interesting shot there. Just burn her face off. And we end on a rough pencil page. This could be final pencils, could be a small layout, because, I mean, you know, the way the smaller figures are drawn and the fact that, you know, it's up close and it's easy to get up more detail on a small page on some up close drawings. So this could either be finished pencils for the comic or just the rough layout. Still feel it's a little rougher than the other pencils we saw. And that's basically how the comic ends, and Suprema flies away, and that's all we get. The rest of Youngblood Bloodsport, that's all we get. So 14 pages is the actual length of the story here. And then we get Mark Miller's script, right? The rest of it, I guess. Not going to go through that. And then we get some sketches. So I feel like most of these sketches, again, are pretty much page layouts. So, okay, you know what? I could be wrong about some of the pages in the actual comic being rough layouts. They might be a little bit tighter, because I do see, I've seen this before from Liefeld. This is a little more typical of his rough layouts. So this feels like, okay, I recognize it now. This is definitely one of the pages that we saw, the first or second page, right? He's moved some stuff around, I think, a little bit, but yeah, that's basically what we got. So I feel like these are all sketches relating to the actual comic. Like Rob Liefeld, if he sketched this like this here, if Rob Liefeld could kind of draw like this all the time, I feel like what's going on here, the anatomy, everything feels pretty spot on. Like, I don't know, this drawing, even though it's a sketch, I think is very successful. The body language, the anatomy, everything, it's not typically Liefeld. It almost feels like someone with a better grasp on general anatomy and positioning and body language drew this. So yeah, I'm very surprised by this. Even this too, I find there's a more naturalistic kind of feel to it. It's almost like, what if Liefeld just kind of drew like this in his comics, right? You know, it's a little rough, but just a little tighter. Have someone ink this, but keep it simple. Not too many like hatchings and, you know, just kind of that clean style. I find works and almost has a bit of almost like a manga feel to it. It's interesting. Yeah, I'm really into these sketches here. Okay, so obviously with this character, we get a manga influence, which I think is pretty obvious, but again, feels much more well drawn than most Rob Liefeld stuff for some reason. This too. Yeah, there's something about his style at this point that, you know, I think he was kind of maybe... I've often talked about how Rob Liefeld gets influenced by stuff around him and what's going on in the moment in his art, not criticizing him about that. I think that's normal. A lot of artists do that. So I feel like in around this period, maybe he's being more influenced by like Brian Hitch and the more naturalistic artists, right? He's kind of going more for a more realistic style within the Rob Liefeld, you know, tropes. So I do kind of like, I think some of the best art I've seen from Rob Liefeld, honestly, is in these sketches here. Very good stuff. And I think that brings us to the end, if I'm not mistaken. That's the back comic. Kind of insane that this 14-page thing was $4 back in the early 2000s. Pretty expensive, and yeah, so I think that's pretty much the end of this. Let's hit back on the cover, have a look at that one last time. So there you go, guys. That is my review of Youngblood Bootleg Bloodsport, Bootleg Youngblood Bloodsport, or Youngblood Bloodsport Bootleg, issue number 2, the very last vestiges of the Youngblood Bloodsport miniseries by Rob Liefeld and written by Mark Millar. If you're still watching videos on my channel, thank you so much for being there. And if you're subscribed, thank you for being loyal to the channel. If you're watching videos but you are not subscribed, please do so. It only takes a quick second for you. It really helps the channel out. Helps get us out there to other people who are like-minded and are into the same kind of stuff that we are, namely comic books. So everyone watching, thank you so much for your time and have an awesome day. King Comics presents Big Baby, Volume 1, Issues 1 to 13, 204 pages of story and art. King Comics also presents Star Crasher one-shot, 32 pages, cosmic sci-fi surrealist adventure. You can find these fine comics at KingComics.CA, at MaximusRex13 on Instagram, or on Facebook, MaxRex or Big Baby. Like!